friends, welcome back. So in the last episode, we discussed how any given sound will additionally have these three properties: duration, density, and spatial location. In this episode, we'll wrap up our exploration of the nature of sound and finally move into music theory. So let's begin by wrapping up our examination of density, continuing with a look at spatial location, and then talk a little about the origination of music theory as well as its relevance to you. In musical terms, density is a description of how thick, dense, or thin, open a composition sounds as related to the amount of different pitches or instrument parts. Fewer individual pitches or instrument parts yields a thin sound. On the other hand, an abundance of different pitches and instrumental parts yields a thicker, denser sound. In other words, the greater the amount of different pitches or instrumental parts there are, the thicker, denser the composition will be. We can illustrate this with two different versions of the same composition. Most listeners would agree that the second arrangement is way more dense than the first one. In this respect, how busy a piece of music sounds can refer to its density, if for no other reason than there are way more pitches being played during the same amount of time passing. From an audio perspective, the different timbres of various instruments as well as the frequency range that pitches are played in, low, middle, or high frequency, can both have an effect on the apparent thickness or density of the sound. In regards to timbre, remember that the design of an instrument causes certain partials in the harmonic series to be suppressed, while other partials will be amplified. This can make certain instruments sound thicker than other instruments. Listen to the exact same pitches played by the piano, clarinets, flutes, cellos, French horns, and trombones. Notice how much thicker or more dense the French horn sound than the flutes or piano. Flutes have a thinner sound while the French horns are thicker. This is due to a large extent to the difference in which partials are being emphasized by each instrument's design. Composers and songwriters often exploit these inherent differences in the texture of various instruments. To observe the effect frequency range has on the apparent density of a sound, let's listen to three pitches played together on the piano. Now let's move those same pitches up or down an octave. If we play all the pitches up 2 octaves, we get a very thin sound. On the other side of the spectrum, if we move the same pitches down 2 octaves, we get a very thick sound. One thing you may have noticed is how the same three pitches played down 2 octaves sounds more muddy and unclear than the same 3 pitches an octave up. This is a principle that songwriters and composers have to be aware of to write music that sounds good. Now, what if we move some, but not all, of the pitches up or down an octave? Here are a few configurations. By exploiting the density characteristics of different frequency ranges, we can create a thick, thin, or balanced sound. Spatial location. Spatial location, as it relates to sound, refers to where a sound source is perceived to be coming from. Listen to the following 2 examples.
Hey, you! Hey, come here! Hey, you! Hey, come here!
Where is the sound coming from? The left side, of course. Audio engineers refer to this as panning, i.e., the sound is panned to the left. Let's try 2 more examples. Which one is close and which one is far away?
Hey, you!
Psst. Hey, you.
If you guessed the first sound was far away, you'd be right. Now, let's try one last example.
Hey, you!
Where is this sound coming from? Yep, the sound is coming from the right side, far away. Of course, these are extreme examples and there are gradations of left and right, close and far. There is also an up and down positioning, but it is very difficult to translate this on a normal speaker setup on a computer or stereo system, since the 2 speakers are typically positioned left and right. This effect is much easier to achieve with lower and higher speakers present, however. There is also 3-dimensional software which tries to emulate the up and down spatial locations of the sound, but it is not completely convincing. Try listening to these next examples with headphones on as I use this 3-dimensional software, known as ambisonics, to move a sound around. Here is the example. I am now moving the sound above, below, center and near you, to the left and far away, to the right and near you, and behind you. Could you hear it? The next time you are out and about, you might try closing your eyes and identifying where a particular sound source is coming from. Where is it in terms of left and right, horizontally, up and down, vertically, in front of you or behind you, or near or far, distance? From this point forward, we can continue on with musical terms. Before jumping into music theory, we should discuss what kind of theory we'll be talking about. There are several kinds of music theory. For example, people from non-Western cultures like India or China approach music differently than we do. For our purposes, I'll be covering Western music theory most professional musicians use, but I'll intersperse it with classical theory taught in universities for our viewers attending college. Where possible, I'll give the contemporary equivalent of classical music theory terminology and concepts, so those currently attending school can get an easy-to-understand definition. The simple truth is, much of the terminology used in college music theory courses is not heard much outside of academic circles. Additionally, I have often found some explanations and definitions unnecessarily convoluted, which is sad since much of it is often relevant and practical today. So when possible, I will provide current examples of music demonstrating classical theory concepts. To quote Wikipedia, music theory is the study of the practices and possibilities of music. It goes on to state that music theory is frequently concerned with describing how musicians and composers make music, including tuning systems and composition methods, among other topics. It additionally states that music theory as a practical discipline encompasses the methods and concepts composers and other musicians use in creating music. So, the study of music theory should teach you about the various possibilities or choices in relation to composing music. If I had to define music theory, I would say it is the study of the structure of musical forms and elements through analysis. It's important to realize that with few exceptions, contemporary music theory came after the music itself. People did not create a theory and then use it to write music to fit the theory. It was usually the other way around. Compositions that were pleasing to the ear were studied and analyzed to see if they shared common traits. If they did, these analysts created a theory to demonstrate the common traits so future composers could understand the works of others and use that theory to create original compositions. In other words, it's a way of understanding and predicting how harmony or melody might move. Today is no different. People still use theory to analyze and understand current music to create their own music. Even a cursory study of its origins reveals that the earliest forms of music theory were attempts to understand the nature of the universe, harmony, musical and otherwise, and human aesthetics and psychology. So it shouldn't be surprising that the earliest music theorists were Greek philosophers. Pythagoras, Philolaus, and Archytas are some of the earliest of these philosophers, with Pythagoras in the 6th century BC being the most widely credited for developing the earliest forms of music theory. Pythagoras approached music much like a science and believed music and the universe was mathematical in nature and could also explain human aesthetic feelings and psychology. He conducted musical experiments with things such as string lengths to discover mathematical ratios, and from this developed a tuning system called Pythagorean tuning. According to Wikipedia again, Pythagorean philosophers advanced the unshakable belief that the essence of all things are numbers, and that the universe was sustained by harmony. Later on, a 6th century Roman politician and philosopher by the name of Boethius authored a book entitled De Institutione Musica, with the goal of helping his contemporaries to understand Greek music and Greek music theorists. He believed that math and music were entangled and again sought to understand the universe through both disciplines. As history progresses, a monk, composer, and music theorist by the name of Hucbald wrote the first methodical piece on Western music theory. During this time, an early type of notation for archival purposes was developed known as neumes. This was a 4-line staff with notes that implied the overall contour of melody, but was not exact in either rhythms or notes. A more exact form of music notation later followed called mensural notation, which was more specific in rhythms, but still used no bar lines and is the precursor to the music notation system we know today. I should mention that it's not necessary to understand music theory or even read music to succeed in the music business. There are scores of musicians making 6-figure incomes that don't even know the names of the notes on their instrument. And it's expected less for audio engineers. For this program, however, we need a common language to communicate with, and so I will be teaching you through conventional music notation. But don't worry, if you don't read music, it's not a problem. You'll learn how to do that here too. Have you ever tried to figure out a piece of music and wondered, what is this chord? Why is this chord here? Why do these notes work over this chord? What is this rhythm? These are questions that music theory answers. In short, music theory enables you to understand the structure or construction of music, including songs, compositions, and even instrumental solos. It shows you the patterns and harmonic or rhythmic structure of any style of music. And by studying this, it helps you to predict the kinds of chords, chord progressions, melody note choices, instrumentation, rhythmic patterns, and even the kind of engineering and mixing choices to expect from a genre or style of music. This knowledge also gives you choices when you are composing or songwriting. It all comes down to using theory to understand genre choices and what is stylistically correct for that genre, which means that theory is often style and era-based. For example, there are musical patterns and structures that existed during the classical era that would never be used in the jazz or commercial music context. This is what gives different styles and eras of music their distinct sounds and personalities. What makes things interesting is you can often combine elements from different styles or eras to come up with something completely unique. So, in a way, being aware of the elements of different musical genres can increase your chances of developing a truly unique musical voice. It's helpful to think of music as a language. Like any other language, we initially learn by imitating. So, for example, if you wanted to build your own house, you might start by studying how others built their houses and then apply that cumulative knowledge toward the construction of your own house. Relating this to music, if you like a particular song, you can use music theory to analyze it, study the construction, and then create an original song based on what you learned about the construction. In the words of none other than Igor Stravinsky, good composers borrow, great composers steal. From here, we can continue on to musical terms. Thanks for watching the video. Be sure to like and leave a comment below, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you've enjoyed the music you've been hearing, be sure to check out my friend Byron Fry's album, Explosive, at this link.